Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading update for, well, I can't pretend that it's a Friday, but even more embarrassing than missing that deadline is the fact that we are over halfway through April 2022 now, and this is my first reading update of the month. And to be frank, I'm not thrilled with where I am in my month's TBR, basically, now that I have half a month left and certainly more than half of my reading list. So we'll see how I do. But as this is the first AM reading update of the month, I will point you to my latest literary newsletter, which I wrote for my March reading. I have snippets of the reviews I wrote on Goodreads for all the books I read in March. I also have literary news that caught my fancy. I have a book pick, a book quote, all that good stuff in the newsletter linked below. So as always with these AM reading updates since last May, I am starting with the next story in this collection of Dorothy Parker's complete short stories. The one I read for this week is called Mrs. Carrington and Mrs. Crane, which was published in 1933. And it is pretty apropos for Dorothy Parker. We have a dashed-off story, very closely focused on dialogue between two characters. These two characters are two married women who are talking about their social scene, and they're doing a lot of grousing and a lot of complaining about, you know, the vapid nature of the people that they go to parties with every night. You know, all these people, they are always just talking about their dieting, and they're always wearing the same knockoff clothes of one another, and it's just so, you know, hard to be around these horrible, vapid people. And of course, through the dialogue, you learn that Mrs. Carrington and Mrs. Crane are exactly the same, and that they keep going to these parties, and they talk about, you know, the dieting and exercise regimens that they want to do, and they talk about the clothes that, you know, are similar to other clothes that other people wear. And, you know, you get that feeling at the end of it that even though they're saying, you know, thank God you're there, that maybe they'd talk about each other behind each other's backs, because they're all basically the same people. It's kind of how you know you're in a Dorothy Parker short story, where particularly women are put through the ringer for their hypocritical and vapid behavior. I guess the one saving grace of Mrs. Carrington and Mrs. Crane are that they're both married, so they're not quite as boy crazy, man desperate as the singletons in a Dorothy Parker short story. I mean, it is cleverly written with the dialogue and everything, but, you know, it gets old after a while, this same critique over and over again. But anyway, moving on. The first book I finished in April is APEIROGON by Colum McCann. I've been meaning to read this for a while. I was disappointed when it made its way off the BookTube Prize last year before I'd even get the chance to read it. Of course, there's so many books on the BookTube Prize, you can't read them all unless you make a very concentrated effort. But anyway, I finally picked this up because my synagogue's Israel book club was going to read it, and we were going to meet earlier last week to talk about it, but unfortunately the rabbi had to cancel our meeting, and it's not rescheduled yet. I don't know when it will be. Now we're in Passover, so things are hectic for everybody. So anyway, this is the story, ostensibly, of an Israeli man and a Palestinian man, both of whom lost daughters to the conflict, and it ostensibly goes into their grief about that and their interactions with the occupation. But really, this novel is far more artsy-fartsy than just following two bereaved parents in this conflict, and even talking just about the conflict, because it's like a more stream of consciousness style, and McCann is insistent on, you know, connecting a bunch of, you know, really broad dots to the conflict, like, you know, the creation of gunpowder, you know, as you do, or, you know, paintings and philosophy from, you know, far distant places and climes and histories and so forth. It's just this very grandiose stream of consciousness, almost pastiche, to understanding the idea of the conflict and what goes into it, which I think what it really is missing more than anything else is the human touch. I really do wish that I'd gotten the chance to talk with my book club about the book first. I have confidence in my own opinions, right? I have a booktube channel where mostly I just ramble off my own thoughts on books, especially fiction books. But I feel like, I don't know, I've been taking a lot of comfort from the book club and from, you know, incorporating, you know, what they got out of the book into what I got out of the book. So I wish I had the chance with this one, and hopefully we will meet in the future. But I went ahead and, you know, reviewed the book on Goodreads, and now in front of you. Just based off my own merits and off of some of the, I do enjoy reading some, you know, professional and so forth book reviews, so I did a little bit of that as well and incorporated it into my own Goodreads review. I'm having a bit of a conversation with literature myself, maybe hopefully not quite as grandiose as what McCann tried to do here, which I ultimately don't think worked as well as I hoped it would. The next book I finished was on audiobook. This is TERRAN Tomorrow by Nancy Kress. It is the final in her trilogy called Yesterday's Kin. And I guess ultimately I feel disappointed in this book as well. I feel like there was something in the first book, it wasn't flawless, but it had a lot of potential and promise. I think that the last two books, I guess I didn't feel like it lived up to as much. It's interesting, it's a hard science, near future story. It deals a lot with viruses and pandemics, which in today's day and age feels a lot more prescient to even non-scientists like me. So the fact that all three books were repetitive about the need to, research viruses, it rang true to me. I guess the thing that rang less true to me is that we needed all of these big plots about, bioweapons and, warfare between human clashing peoples rather than just viruses mutating on their own. But that's what's been going on. In this final book, the main character, Marianne Jenner, she's been the main character. She's a geneticist through all three books. She had been on an alien planet. She returns home to Earth. It's 28 years later. There's some weird timey-wimey stuff, so she's not much older. And she returns to a world that, because of, climate change and other things that happened in these books, the world is now collapsed, basically. There was a environmental extremist group that was able to turn a virus into a mass weapon that killed, 96% of the population, as you do. And then communications between the world, stopped by that point. So we only have to focus on the U.S. in this book, where Marianne Jenner and her crew land and conveniently convene with her grandson, who is now one of the most superior members of the military, so what have you. So anyway, we're focused on America. What's left of America are the normal army is basically in tatters. It's defending these alien domes that they've been able to create based on the technology from earlier books. It's the only thing that, it can withstand anything but like nuclear assault, and they are on the defensive from this terrorist group called New America. So that's where they are right now, and they also are trying to fully eradicate this bioweapon, which is being still carried by sparrows, so that it will continue to infect people and have devastating impacts on humans. Although in good news, I suppose, the environment does seem to be recovering. It's been about, 10 years in this book since the collapse. But then Marianne and her crew come with, this alien environment, this virofiche from book 2, and then that interacts with the U.S. and with Earth for the first time, and that creates even, more problems or issues, big issues of certain people with a certain gene. They interact with this virophage and they fall into a coma for a while, and we just don't have the scientific know-how to understand quite what's happening. Although this virophage and the people with this gene, it turns out to be sort of a plot convenience in the way that it sort of jumps intelligence so that we now they get more of an understanding of what's going on with, while the book only takes a couple of months rather than, you know, generations of research. I mean, there's a lot of fascinating science stuff in here, or stuff that I'm not well versed enough in science to, you know, critique too deeply. It's definitely hard sci-fi. There's just a lot of science and also a lot of military in this as well, which kind of reminds me how I don't like military science fiction, and I'm just not in the right headspace, I think, for this sort of cynical, apocalyptic world building. You know, I feel like I'm questioning my own cynicism. I had a book club with my mom and aunties where we read The Lincoln Highway, and I was easily the most cynical about that book. And I think I was annoying some of the people in the book club with that. So maybe I'm like questioning my sense of cynicism and thinking, how much do I really believe that with 4% of the population left, all we'd be doing is fighting each other and so much of the military would be intact? I mean, it's not even that much, but I don't know, and I guess there's always a lot of military. I don't know. I did just, you know, watch and have been obsessed with the Station 11 adaptation, where, you know, it's a apocalypse of art, not war. And that one is far more appealing. And in terms of characterization, well, I feel like the characters in Station 11 are far more moving as well. I think Kress did okay with her characterization in the Yesterday's Kin series, but there's just so much plot going on at all times that she couldn't develop them to an incredible depth. So I feel like the first book, I don't know, it took place over 10 years and less happened, which in a way feels more believable to me. You know, that you know, the world doesn't implode in the first book. It's a lot more, it's more subtle than that, which is feels a little more realistic. Maybe I'm being too optimistic. And there's this sense of promise about, you know, human interaction and human history, and well, there's spoilers I'm skirting about the nature of some of the aliens they encounter. But the next two books, you know, it kind of skirts that sort of sense of promise in a way, because there's a lot of bad that happens. Although there still are always scientists looking to, you know, save the human race, so that's good. And then the ending of this book was interesting as well. It kind of, you know, the military gets the upper hand in terms of what they believe about the way that humans and intelligence and threats work. And it's a pretty bleak sort of belief system, even if the people espousing that belief system aren't mustache-twirling villains. It still is very cynical about the nature of humans, and, well, I guess we're just going to have a military dictatorship of a sort now. So, I don't know. That's kind of what I got out of this series, and as fascinated as I was by several aspects, especially the science, I just don't think ultimately it was quite for me. And the last sort of mediocre book I just finished, I guess that's part of the reason this video feels a little depressing, is it's kind of a meh start to the month. But anyway, that book is Vaclav and Lena by Haley Tanner. This is a book I've had on my Goodreads TBR for several years. I call it my top of the Goodreads TBR reading list, so I finally got to it. It's technically, I guess, an adult novel, although to an extent it reads like YA, and the characters are, you know, teens and children to teens. It's about these two Russian Jewish immigrant children living in Brighton Beach in Brooklyn, which is a very Russian Jewish immigrant enclave. Vaclav is a young boy in the beginning who dreams of being a magician. I think it's his way of trying to acclimate to a new culture. And he, you know, when he comes to America as a very young boy, it takes him a little while to even find friends. And then he is able to befriend this sort of enigmatic girl named Lena. He doesn't know much about her upbringing yet. That'll come later. But she's also an immigrant who's very much struggling with, you know, language acquisition and that sort of thing. And even at the beginning of the novel, it's hinted that her home situation isn't great, and she is an orphan who lives with her aunt. So the first section is Vaclav trying to, you know, entice Lena to be his beautiful assistant, and there's like a little bit of them going to Coney Island and seeing a real act, you know, and, you know, kind of falling in love with the fantasy and the magic of that and wanting to emulate it. But Lena's having a lot of trouble. She is, she's like a young 9-year-old girl, can't express herself all that well. She's, stealing, and mostly from Vaclav and his family, and he's doing her homework for her because she really can't keep up with any of it at all. And Vaclav's mother realizes something, bad is going on. We see her, taking Lena home and cleaning up her aunt's like really, badly maintained apartment and that sort of thing. And then ultimately Lena is sick and she doesn't come to school, and when Vaclav's mother checks on her, she's gone for a long time, and it turns out she called the police, who took Lena into protective custody. And then for the next, I guess, 8 years or so, the two of them are separated, and Vaclav at least has no idea where Lena is. And then in the next section, we kind of see them as teenagers, and Vaclav is still kind of a dreamer. And then Lena's doing kind of well for herself. Like she was put with a really, supportive and nurturing foster mother and ultimately adopted mother who apparently, like it's mostly told in backstory, like gets Lena, her education up to snuff, and Lena's able to have what seems to be a pretty active social life, although inside she's still kind of traumatized by things that happened to her, and we go into her backstory about how she ended up with her aunt, and then what happened with her aunt and that sort of thing. And then she ultimately reaches out to Vaclav again and really just wants his help finding out her story, which he ultimately finds out through her aunt. It's a tragic story, and he lies about it to her. And even though she knows it's a lie, it's kind of a fantasy that's better than the reality. And it goes a little bit into the fact that all of this was happening. The two of them were born basically as the Soviet Union was disintegrating, and it was just it was a very dangerous place to live, and there was drugs and crime and all this sort of stuff, and that touches both of their lives, especially Lena's family's lives. And ultimately, there were some things I liked. To a certain degree, I respected, the narrative style that Tanner was writing the story, like in that sort of broken English of people who are learning the language. And then I think the section where we're inside Lena's head and we're kind of talking about how she deals with her sense of dissociation and trauma, I felt like that was really well done. But the rest of it just wasn't really well done for me. There's too much backstory, too much exposition. You were reading because you were interested in the melodrama or the drama of it all, but I don't feel like it was all that well executed on the page. So that's pretty much what disappointed me with this one. But next on the docket, hopefully not to be a disappointment, is The Black Church. This is our story, this is our song by Henry Louis Gates Jr. I'll just say that it's obviously about what the title says. It's about the formation of and the impact of the Black Church on the African American community. But I can't say any more than that because I am reading this as a judge for the BookTube Prize for the quarterfinals. So the BookTube Prize was started by Robert at Barter Hordes a couple of years ago, and I've been a judge for most of the years of the prize. We are judging the best in nonfiction, literary fiction, and translated fiction that was published last year in the U.S. So yeah, I did make a video about my preliminary thoughts on my ballot that I'm doing for the quarterfinals. I'm judging nonfiction Group A, and I'll link to that video and more information about the BookTube Prize down below. So that about covers it for me now. I guess I'll leave another link down below. I talked a little bit earlier about getting deep into trying to read reviews of some books, and I also listen to podcasts sometimes with authors, and I did listen to one recently about world building with Nancy Kress, who has written far more books than just the Yesterday's Kin series. I liked her world building podcast, so I'll link that down below as well for fellow SFF readers and writers. So it's been kind of a frustrating beginning of the month, not only because of the reading, which I guess has been a little lackluster. Maybe that's part inspired by some other stuff going on. My cat's had a little bit of some health crises, and in fact, On Wednesday, I'm taking her to the vet for surgery to remove what I hope is a benign tumor. They think it's benign, and she's acting normal, pretty normal. But still, it's a bit of a strain emotionally and financially. Hoping I'll be in a far better place a week from now. We shall see. But actually, I also intend to be on this channel again much more quickly than that, because I have the results of the BookTube spin number 6, which is a TBR game I take part in that Rick McDonnell runs. And just the other day, he spun the wheel for BookTube spin number 6, and now I have another book to add to my TBR, not for this month, but sometime within this quarter. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, I hope all of you are having a happy and healthy weekend. I hope everyone celebrating springtime holidays are having a good time with that. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.